This podcast is the last podcast of a series of podcasts that discussed pattern analysis for the diagnosis of pigmented skin lesions with specificity. In this podcast, we will discuss pattern analysis for lesions with multiple patterns. So far, we talked about lesions with single patterns, lesions with a reticular pattern, or lesions with parallel lines, or lesions with a pattern of dots, clots, circles, or a structureless pattern. But of course there are lesions with multiple patterns, and the multiple patterns can be combined in a symmetric fashion or in an asymmetric fashion. If they are combined in an asymmetric fashion, we call it chaotic. Let's view an example. This lesion here has two patterns, clots at the periphery and structureless in the center, but the two patterns are combined symmetrically, there is no chaos. This lesion here has two patterns, reticular lines and structureless. The structureless part here has multiple colors, but there is also an asymmetric combination of the two patterns, reticular lines and structureless, so this lesion is chaotic. Now, how to use pattern analysis for lesions with multiple patterns? Well, the first and most important point is that if there are multiple patterns, you analyze the lesion according to the most specific pattern. Now, but what is the most specific pattern? Lines are usually more specific than all other patterns. This includes reticular lines, radial lines, parallel lines, and curved lines. Then the second most specific pattern is pseudopods, then circles, then clots, and then dots, and the structureless pattern is the least specific pattern. Let's look at an example. This lesion here has two patterns, structureless and reticular lines. Now, forget structureless, reticular lines is more specific. What could a lesion with reticular lines be? Well, it could be a melanoma, it could be a nevus, it could be a solar lentigo SEPK, LPLK, we combine this to one diagnosis, and a dermatofibroma. Why could it not be an ink spot lentigo? Because an ink spot lentigo usually only has reticular lines and not another pattern. A BCC does not have reticular lines. A pigmented IEC or Bowen's disease does not have reticular lines. A hemangioma does not have reticular lines. So reticular lines plus another pattern has only 4 differential diagnoses. Now, what about reticular lines plus another pattern, but combined in an asymmetric fashion, which means chaos? Well, this eliminates nevus and dermatofibroma, so we are left with melanoma and solar lentigo SEPK. Now let's look at the lesion again. Is there any specific clue to seborrheic keratosis? No, there isn't. Is there any specific clue to melanoma? Yes, there are white lines here and there are gray structures here. So, based on pattern analysis, this is a melanoma, which is correct. So, patterns and colors lead us to a list of differential diagnoses, and the differential diagnoses are then solved by clues. Now, there are other combination of patterns, including clots plus structureless, like in this case. Here we see blue and gray clots, some brown clots, plus structureless. The combination of these two patterns is asymmetric. We again have chaos. Now, what could a lesion with this combination of patterns be? Well, it's easy. It could be a melanoma, it could be a solar lentigo SEPK LPLK, or it could be a BCC. Now, what is it? Now, let's go back. It is not a SEPK because there are no clues to SEPK. So it could be a melanoma or a basal cell carcinoma. Now let's look at clues. We have gray clots. Gray clots and blue clots are more likely in a BCC. We have white lines. White lines can be found in both BCC and melanoma, so the white lines will not help us. Then what else do we have? We have no reticular pattern. A lesion without a reticular pattern, especially if it is a flat lesion, if you have the differential diagnosis of BCC versus melanoma, what is more likely? Of course, a BCC is more likely. Then what else do we have? We have probably a small zone of ulceration here, and this is also more likely in a BCC. So the diagnosis is BCC. This lesion has two patterns, structureless in the center and reticular at the periphery. With this combination of colors, hyperpigmented in the center, it can only be a nevus. A dermatofibroma can also have this combination of patterns, but then the center is not hyperpigmented, it is hypopigmented, usually white in a dermatofibroma. So there's only one differential diagnosis, nevus, clot nevus. This lesion here has two patterns in symmetric combination. Clots at the periphery, reticular in the center. There's also a structural spot in the center. Now, what could it be? There is only one solution. It is a nevus, a growing nevus, because only a growing nevus has this type of combination of patterns. This lesion has multiple patterns. Which one? Clots and structurals. What is more specific? Clots. Now let's analyze it according to the pattern of clots. We already had this combination. It could be a melanoma, it could be a SEPK, or it could be a BCC. Now, do you see any clues to SEPK? No. Is it a melanoma or is it a BCC? What is more likely? Blue and gray clots are more likely in a BCC. The absence of a reticular pattern is more likely in a PCC. Radial lines at the periphery connected at a common base is more likely in a PCC. Now what is it? A PCC, correct. This lesion here has two patterns, curved lines, and here you see circles. What is more specific? Curved lines or circles? Curved lines are more specific. The curved lines are thick. Now, what could it be? A SEPK. No differential diagnosis. Correct. This lesion has how many patterns? Two, structurals and clots. What could a lesion with these patterns be? Well, it depends. Is it a symmetric combination or an asymmetric combination? It is an asymmetric combination of these two patterns. It is chaotic. It could be a melanoma, a BCC, or a SEPK. But it is not a SEPK because there are no clues to SEPK. Is it a melanoma or BCC? What can we see here? There is the clue of white reticular lines. The white lines are arranged in a reticular pattern, so this is specific to melanoma. It will not be you will not find this in a BCC. So the diagnosis is melanoma, correct. This lesion has two patterns, radial lines and structurals. A lesion with radial lines and structurals could be a melanoma or a BCC. But here what we see a reticular pattern in this part. Reticular lines and branched lines exclude the diagnosis of BCC, so it's a melanoma. This lesion here has two patterns, curved lines and clots. Which pattern is more specific? Curved lines. Thick curved lines are the pattern of a seborrheic keratosis. There are other clues to seborrheic keratosis, yellow clots, and so on. This is a SEPK. This lesion here has three patterns, reticular lines, here clots, and structurals. Which is the most specific pattern? Reticular lines. What can it be? It can be a melanoma, a nevus, SEPK, solontigo, dermatofibroma. But the patterns are arranged in a chaotic fashion, so we can eliminate nevus and we can eliminate dermatofibroma. Now what is left? Melanoma or SEPK? But there are no clues to SEPK, and there are clues to melanoma. Yes, the thick white and gray lines. So what's the diagnosis? Melanoma. So this is how it works. Pattern analysis is used to analyze the lesion according to pattern and colors. Then you get a list of differential diagnoses and then you solve it by clues. And if you have a lesion with multiple patterns, you analyze the lesion according to the most specific patterns. Lines first, pseudopods, circles, clots, dots, and then structurals. That's all, folks. Thanks for watching.